You have probably carried too much on your shoulders today. The weight of deadlines, family responsibilities, or simply the restless noise of modern life presses down until even your breath feels heavy. Maybe you are lying awake right now hoping that just one peaceful thought could settle your racing mind. You are not alone in this. People across the world, from busy city apartments to quiet suburban homes, know this exact struggle. And yet, more than 2,000 years ago, a young man faced the same storm inside himself and discovered a path that still speaks to us today. Imagine this for a moment. A life filled with everything most people dream of. Comfort, safety, beauty, and certainty carefully arranged so that no sadness or discomfort could enter. That was the world Siddhartha was born into. A palace without cracks, a life polished to perfection. Yet even there, in the heart of abundance, he felt a hollow space inside that nothing could fill. Have you ever reached a milestone you worked for, bought the car, landed the promotion, or moved into the dream home and still found yourself asking quietly, "Is this all there is?" That question, unspoken yet undeniable, is where our journey begins. Tonight you will hear the story of a prince who walked away from his golden walls, not because he wanted more, but because he needed to understand why. Having everything still felt like nothing. His journey is not just ancient history. It is a mirror reflecting the lives we live today. We build digital palaces of curated photos and endless notifications. We filter reality until it looks perfect. But beneath the surface, many of us feel the same quiet emptiness Siddhartha once felt as he gazed beyond the palace gates. The hook of this story is not in its age, but in its relevance. Siddhartha's awakening did not come through more wealth, more beauty, or more distractions. It came when he stepped into the raw, unfiltered world, when he allowed himself to see aging, sickness, death, and also the possibility of freedom. His questions were bold, but they are not so different from the ones that keep us awake at night. What truly matters when time is short? How do we live fully in a world that constantly changes? Is peace possible without running away from life? As you listen, allow yourself to settle into this moment. You do not need to solve anything right now. You do not need to become someone else. You only need to listen with curiosity. The story of the Buddha is not only about a man long ago. It is about you, about all of us learning how to see clearly in the middle of our noisy modern lives. Tonight, let this journey be an invitation to rest, to reflect, and to consider that peace might already be closer than you think. From the very beginning of his life, Siddhartha Gautama was wrapped in a cocoon of perfection so carefully crafted that it was meant to blind him from the world as it really was. His father, King Suddhodana, feared the prophecy that had been spoken when his son was born. Wise men told him the child would either become a world-conquering ruler or renounce all worldly possessions to become a great spiritual teacher. To a king whose duty and desire was to preserve his lineage, the idea that his son might abandon the throne was unbearable. So the king chose control as his solution. He would build a life so flawless, so endlessly pleasurable, that the young prince would never dream of leaving it. The palace grounds themselves were designed not just as a home, but as an elaborate theater of happiness. 3 magnificent palaces rose across the kingdom, one for each season. In the heat of summer, Siddhartha lived, surrounded by cooling pools, shaded gardens and breezes carried by servants waving fans woven from the softest palm leaves. In the cool months of winter, warm fires, thick blankets, and carefully managed celebrations ensured that no chill ever touched his skin. During the rains, the palace walls themselves seemed to glow, polished to brilliance, while music filled the air to drown out the sound of thunder. His entire world was curated so that nature itself bent to his comfort. Everywhere he looked, youth and vitality shone back at him. His attendants were chosen for beauty and strength, their smiles trained to never falter. Should one fall ill, they were immediately replaced, escorted quietly to another part of the kingdom, where the prince would never see them again. The old, the sick, the weary were invisible. Flowers that wilted overnight were plucked at dawn, so that Siddhartha's eyes only rested on blossoms at their peak. Even the animals in his gardens were carefully selected for their elegance and health. Horses never stumbled, peacocks always spread their feathers, deer pranced lightly across manicured fields, as though life itself was a performance staged for one young man's delight. At first, Siddhartha knew nothing else. Like any child, he accepted the world as it was presented to him. He learned his lessons from tutors, who praised his quick mind. He practiced archery with bows strung to perfection. He rode horses that responded to his every touch, as if born to obey. In these early years, he believed his life was reality, not illusion. He did not know that walls had been built, not of stone alone, but of silence, secrecy, and denial. He did not yet understand that his father's love, though fierce, was also a prison. But as the boy grew, so too did a restlessness that the king could neither predict nor prevent. For all the music and laughter echoing through his chambers, Siddhartha sometimes found himself staring beyond the palace gates. He did not yet know why, only that something seemed missing. A life filled to the brim with entertainment and distraction left no room for the quiet hum of truth. And truth, though hidden, has a way of calling to those who are ready to hear it. The king noticed this restless gaze and doubled his efforts. More festivals were arranged. More games and competitions filled the young prince's days. At 16, Siddhartha was married to the kind and beautiful Yasodhara, a princess whose gentle presence might have anchored another man to palace life forever. She was compassionate, graceful, and deeply loving. Together they laughed, walked through rose gardens, and shared tender conversations by candlelight. But even love could not silence the faint whisper inside Siddhartha that something essential was absent. What was it that stirred this discontent? Perhaps it was the strange silence of the palace itself, a silence too smooth, too perfect, as though all edges had been sanded away. When everyone around you is forever young and forever smiling, when no wrinkle ever creases a face, when no cough interrupts the music, you begin to wonder if the world is being filtered. You begin to feel the edges of a lie, even if you cannot yet name it. Siddhartha, still young, began to suspect there was more outside those golden gates than his father allowed him to see. This suspicion is not so foreign to us today. Modern life often creates its own palaces of illusion. We scroll through glowing screens where people post only their most beautiful moments, edited and polished until flaws vanish. We surround ourselves with routines that insulate us from discomfort, instant food to soothe hunger before it deepens, instant entertainment to distract from loneliness before it is felt, endless work to prevent silence from asking it questions. We may not live in literal palaces, but we too build walls against reality, hoping to keep suffering out. And just like Siddhartha, many of us eventually sense that something is false in this perfection. In Siddhartha's case, the cracks in the illusion grew wider with age. He excelled at every skill presented to him: philosophy, debate, sports, military arts. Yet each triumph left him strangely unsatisfied. His days were scheduled from dawn until nightfall, with lessons, hunts, music and feasts. But in quiet moments he stood by the palace windows staring at the mountains beyond. Sometimes servants found him awake at dawn, unmoving, his eyes fixed on horizons he had never crossed. When they asked what he sought, he had no answer. How can you explain a hunger for something you have never tasted? The emptiness deepened when his son Rahula was born. By all appearances, Siddhartha should have been filled with joy, a loving wife, a healthy child, a future throne, and a kingdom that adored him. Yet, as he held his infant son, he felt not only love but also a weight, as though invisible chains had settled around his heart. Naming the boy Rahula, which means fetter or chain, revealed his inner turmoil. He feared passing down a gilded prison, raising his son inside the same illusion that had trapped him. To love deeply sometimes means to question deeply, and in that moment Siddhartha began to see his life not as a blessing but as a cage. Still, he could not fully articulate what troubled him. It was as though his mind pressed against invisible walls. The palace contained everything a human being could want, and yet wanting was the very problem. Each feast ended, leaving hunger to return. Each celebration faded, leaving silence behind. Each embrace of love, however warm, carried with it the shadow of loss. The young prince began to sense a truth his father had spent decades trying to hide, that even in perfection there is impermanence. Even in beauty there is fragility. Even in love there is the inevitability of change. The illusion of perfection creates its own kind of suffering. When you are told your life is flawless, any glimpse of flaw feels like catastrophe. When you are shielded from sadness, even small disappointments cut deeply. Siddhartha felt this in subtle ways. Moments when a flower wilted before servants could remove it. Moments when a minor injury during sport revealed the body's vulnerability. He began to realize that the palace was not reality, but performance. And performances cannot last forever. To understand his state of mind, imagine growing up never seeing illness, never watching someone age, never facing the reality of death. Imagine believing the human story is endless youth, endless beauty, endless laughter. Then imagine the quiet confusion when your own reflection begins to change, when restlessness gnaws at the edges of your carefully polished days. Siddhartha lived in this paradox, torn between gratitude for his comfort and a gnawing suspicion that comfort was not the same as truth. In modern times, many of us experience a similar contradiction. We may achieve what society tells us should make us happy: career success, financial stability, family milestones. Yet an inner voice whispers that something is missing. We may post smiling photographs while feeling hollow inside. We may follow routines so busy that they leave no space for questions. Just like Siddhartha, we stand at our own palace windows, wondering what lies beyond the walls we have built. The king, sensing his son's unease, believed the solution was more abundance. If distraction had not cured him, perhaps greater distraction would. More festivals, more dances, more dazzling shows were arranged. Musicians played until the night grew thin. Performers filled the halls with stories of heroism and joy. Yet abundance only sharpened the edge of emptiness. For every note of music Siddhartha heard, he also heard the silence beneath it. For every burst of laughter, he felt the echo of sorrow not yet faced. What his father could not understand was that illusion, no matter how brilliant, cannot extinguish the longing for truth. It is tempting to judge the king as controlling, but in truth he acted from love and fear combined. What parent does not want to protect their child from suffering? What parent does not wish to secure the future they dream of for their offspring? The king simply carried this instinct to an extreme. But love that seeks to control becomes a cage, and fear disguised as protection becomes denial. Siddhartha bore the weight of this contradiction in every step he took through the palace halls. By the time he reached his late 20s, the tension inside him had grown unbearable. He was no longer the boy who accepted perfection without question. He was a man who had tasted love and responsibility, who had held his newborn son and felt the heavy question of what kind of world he was passing on. And so the carefully built illusion began to collapse. Not in a single dramatic moment, but slowly, like cracks spreading across ice. Each day, each restless thought, each unanswered question widened the gap between the life he was given and the truth he yearned for. This stage of Siddhartha's life, the stage of perfect illusion, is essential because it shows us that even when life seems flawless, the human heart still longs for meaning. Comfort alone cannot satisfy. Security alone cannot quiet the questions that rise at night. In fact, sometimes the more perfect the illusion, the more powerful the hunger for truth becomes. For it is not suffering alone that pushes us toward awakening. Sometimes it is the unbearable lightness of endless distraction, the fatigue of pleasures that cannot satisfy. And so the prince who had everything began to realize he possessed nothing of true value. His palaces were prisons, his luxuries were chains, his entertainment was a veil hiding reality. In time, those walls would crumble, and he would step into the raw world beyond them. But before that step could be taken, he had to face the deep emptiness of a life built on denial. He had to see clearly that perfection itself was the greatest illusion of all. The illusion of perfection could not last forever. Though King Suddhodana worked tirelessly to shield his son, the truth of life has a way of seeping through even the most polished walls. Siddhartha was no longer a boy. He had grown into a man of intelligence and curiosity. And no festival, no feast, no distraction could quiet the question that pulsed within him. What is beyond these gates? What lies outside the carefully crafted dream of the palace? It was this longing for the unknown that set the stage for the journey that would change not only his life, but also the spiritual destiny of millions across centuries. The story tells us that Siddhartha asked to leave the palace grounds. Perhaps he wanted only a ride through the nearby town. Perhaps he felt the tug of curiosity, a simple desire to see the people of his kingdom. His father, fearful of what his son might encounter, hesitated. But a prince could not be caged forever without suspicion or rebellion. And so the king ordered a grand procession to be arranged. Streets were swept, beggars hidden, the sick and elderly removed from sight. The path was decorated with flowers. Music filled the air, and dancers greeted the prince as his chariot rolled by. But no amount of careful planning can erase reality entirely. On that day, fate had other plans. The first encounter was with age. Among the carefully arranged crowd, Siddhartha's eyes fell upon a figure unlike any he had ever seen. Bent back, trembling hands, hair as white as cotton, skin marked with wrinkles like rivers carved into dry earth. The man's walk was slow, uncertain, each step a struggle. Siddhartha turned to his charioteer in shock. "What is wrong with this man?" he asked. The charioteer, perhaps with hesitation, perhaps with relief at speaking the truth, replied simply, "He is old. All who live, if they are fortunate, will grow old like him." The words struck Siddhartha like an arrow. Old. The concept was foreign to him, a word he had heard but never witnessed. Suddenly, the perfect faces of his attendants felt like masks. Could it be that behind their youthful smiles, time was waiting, patient and unstoppable? Could it be that even his own strong body, his wife's beauty, his child's innocence, all would one day crumble into frailty? For the first time, Siddhartha saw the shadow that falls across every life. The illusion of endless youth was shattered. We who live in the modern world can easily picture this moment. In our culture, youth is worshipped as though it were eternal. Advertisements promise to erase wrinkles. Gyms sell the dream of ageless strength. Digital filters smooth away every imperfection. Yet one day we notice a grey hair, a slower step, or a parent whose once steady hands now tremble. The truth of age arrives without permission. Like Siddhartha, we realize no palace, no wealth, no technology can hold back the tide of time. To see age is to see the first crack in the illusion of permanence. Siddhartha's heart was unsettled. The world had shifted beneath his feet. Still, he returned to the palace, his mind heavy, his gaze restless. But curiosity does not vanish once awakened. He asked again to leave the palace, and again the king arranged a spectacle of beauty. Yet once more fate intervened. This time Siddhartha saw a man writhing in pain, his body thin and weak, his face pale with suffering. His skin carried the marks of illness, his breath came in ragged gasps. Siddhartha froze. "What is this affliction?" he asked. The charioteer spoke. "This man is sick. Sickness comes to all, no matter how strong, no matter how wealthy. No one can escape it." The second arrow pierced deeper than the first. Illness was a reality Siddhartha had never faced. In the palace, anyone who fell sick was whisked away, replaced by fresh faces. Now, confronted with raw suffering, he felt both horror and recognition. If this man could fall ill, then so could he, so could Yasodhara, so could Rahula. His health, which he had taken for granted, was revealed to be fragile, temporary, a gift that could be taken at any moment. Life, he began to see, was not built on certainty, but on shifting ground. For us today, this revelation resonates powerfully. The pandemic reminded the entire globe that no one is untouchable. Rich and poor, young and old, east and west, illness can strike suddenly, rewriting lives in an instant. Hospitals filled families, grieved, and many of us faced the truth that health is not a guarantee. Just as Siddhartha discovered on that ride, we too learned that sickness is part of the human condition. To deny it is to live in illusion, to face it is to begin awakening. The third outing brought the most devastating sight yet. Along the road, Siddhartha saw a still figure carried by mourners, wrapped in cloth, lifeless. The charioteer told him simply, "This is death. All who are born must one day die. No palace walls, no wealth, no love, no achievement can prevent this." Siddhartha was shaken to his core. Death was not a story, not a distant idea. It was an unavoidable truth. His heart raced as he realized that every face he cherished, every joy he knew, was touched by the certainty of loss. His own life, so carefully guarded, would one day end as well. Death was the great equalizer, stripping away the illusions of power and privilege. Here again, the story echoes across centuries into our own lives. In the West, death is often hidden away, spoken of in whispers, sanitized by funeral parlors and distant hospitals. Yet every one of us eventually faces the loss of loved ones. A parent passes a friend, is gone too soon. News headlines remind us daily of mortality. And when death enters our lives, it rearranges our priorities. Suddenly, possessions mean little, while love, kindness, and presence mean everything. Siddhartha's confrontation with death was not unique to him. It is the confrontation every human must eventually face. Shaken by these three revelations, age, sickness, and death, Siddhartha felt the weight of despair. Was life nothing but a cruel cycle of growth, decay, and loss? Was all joy destined to vanish, all beauty destined to fade? For a time, his mind swirled with questions without answers. He might have turned away, sought distraction again in music and feasts. But instead, fate delivered one more encounter. On his fourth outing, Siddhartha saw a wandering ascetic, a monk clothed in simple robes carrying no possessions, his face calm and serene. Unlike the others, this man was not bent by age, not weakened by illness, not broken by grief. His eyes shone with peace, his steps were steady, his presence radiated a quiet strength. Siddhartha asked, "Who is this man and why does he walk with such calm?" The charioteer replied, "He is one who has renounced worldly pleasures to seek freedom from suffering. He has chosen a path of spiritual awakening." In that moment, hope entered Siddhartha's heart. If life was bound to aging, sickness and death, perhaps there was still a way to rise above despair. Perhaps peace was possible not by denying reality, but by facing it fully and discovering its deeper truth. The ascetic became for him a symbol, a beacon pointing beyond the walls of illusion. Where others saw resignation, Siddhartha saw courage. Where others saw loss, Siddhartha saw freedom. For the first time, he glimpsed the possibility of liberation. The four encounters, old age, sickness, death, and the ascetic together formed the turning point of Siddhartha's life. They shattered the illusions built by his father, broke the spell of palace perfection, and opened his eyes to the reality of existence. These were not just random events. They were revelations, each one peeling away another layer of denial until truth stood naked before him. To see clearly is often painful, but it is also the first step toward wisdom. For Siddhartha, these encounters ignited the fire that would drive him from comfort to quest, from prince to seeker, from illusion to awakening. And for us, these encounters remain timeless. We may not ride chariots through ancient streets, but we too meet these truths. We watch our parents age and realize our own bodies will follow. We fall sick, or see sickness ravage those we love. We face death sometimes, suddenly, sometimes slowly, but always inevitably. And we meet people, teachers, mentors, ordinary individuals who seem to carry peace even in the midst of chaos. Their calm awakens in us the same question that stirred in Siddhartha. Is there another way to live? Is there a freedom that does not depend on escaping reality, but on transforming how we see it? The power of this story lies in its universality. The four encounters are not just episodes from ancient India. They are mirrors held up to every human life. They remind us that behind our routines, our ambitions, and our distractions lies the same fragile truth. We cannot control time. We cannot banish illness. We cannot avoid death. But we can choose how we respond. We can seek a deeper understanding that turns despair into wisdom, fear into compassion, and loss into a doorway to freedom. In this way, Siddhartha's journey becomes our own. His shock at seeing an old man echoes our own shock when we first notice a wrinkle on a beloved face. His horror at sickness reflects our own fear when the doctor delivers difficult news. His grief at death mirrors our own sorrow at funerals and memorials. And his hope upon seeing the ascetic mirrors our own longing when we encounter someone whose peace inspires us. The four sights are not only his revelation, they are the universal curriculum of human life. As the chariot carried him back to the palace, Siddhartha knew he could never see the world the same way again. The walls of illusion had crumbled. The perfect palace was no longer a paradise, but a prison. His heart burned with questions. If suffering is inevitable, is there no escape? If death comes for all, what meaning can life hold? If pleasures fade, is joy just an illusion? Or is there a deeper truth waiting to be discovered? These questions would soon propel him beyond palace gates for good. The journey toward awakening had begun. The palace no longer felt like home. After witnessing age, sickness, and death, Siddhartha's heart had been set on fire with questions too urgent to ignore. He walked through the gardens where musicians played and dancers twirled, but the melodies no longer soothed him. He looked at the feasts laid before him, golden bowls overflowing with delicacies, yet each taste carried the bitterness of impermanence. He looked at his wife Yasodhara, whose gentle smile had once filled him with joy, and at his infant son Rahula, whose small fingers curled around his hand, and he felt both love and sorrow. Love because their presence touched the deepest part of him. Sorrow because he knew they too were bound to the cycle of aging, illness, and death. The illusion of permanence had shattered, and the world revealed itself as fragile, fleeting, and filled with suffering. For days he wrestled with his conscience. To leave the palace was unthinkable. He had been groomed his whole life to inherit the throne, to protect his kingdom, to provide for his family. Yet to remain was unbearable. His soul yearned for answers, for freedom beyond the gilded cage of privilege. His nights grew sleepless. In the quiet hours, he wandered through the palace corridors, staring at the walls as if they might reveal their secrets. The faces of the old man, the sick man, the corpse, and the ascetic haunted his dreams. Each vision whispered the same truth: life is suffering, and no palace can hide it forever. One night, while the palace lay in slumber, Siddhartha made his decision. The stars shone above, cold and silent, as if bearing witness. He dressed quietly, walked to his sleeping wife and child, and paused. Yasodhara's breathing was soft. Rahula's tiny body nestled close. The sight pierced him with longing to stay, to let go of his quest and simply embrace the warmth of his family. But a deeper call urged him onward. To truly love them, he thought he must find an answer to suffering, not just for himself, but for all. He touched his son's hand one last time, whispered a silent farewell, and turned away. In that moment, the prince became a seeker. This act would be remembered as the Great Renunciation. With his faithful horse, Kanthaka, and his loyal charioteer, Channa, Siddhartha rode out into the night. The city gates opened quietly, the guards unaware that history itself was slipping into the dark. When dawn approached, they crossed the river and entered the wilderness beyond the kingdom's reach. There, Siddhartha dismounted. He removed his ornaments, his silks, his jeweled sword. He cut his long hair, the mark of royalty, and handed his fine clothes to Channa. Only a simple robe remained, borrowed from a hunter he had met on the road. He asked Channa to return to the palace with Kanthaka, to tell his family that he was safe, but that he had chosen another path. With tears in his eyes, Channa obeyed. Kanthaka is said to have died of grief upon parting, a reminder that even animals felt the weight of this renunciation. Alone now, Siddhartha stepped into the forest, leaving behind the life of a prince for the life of a wanderer. The renunciation was not an escape from responsibility, but an act of profound courage. Siddhartha did not run from life. He ran toward truth. He knew the cost would be immense: the comfort of wealth, the love of his family, the honor of a throne, all exchanged for uncertainty and hardship. Yet he believed the search for liberation demanded this sacrifice. It was the only way to break free from illusion and face reality as it was. For years, Siddhartha traveled among holy men, sages, and ascetics. He listened, learned, and practiced. First, he sought wisdom from renowned teachers who instructed him in deep meditative states. He mastered every technique with extraordinary discipline. His teachers marveled at his capacity, offering him leadership of their schools. But Siddhartha declined. Each state of absorption, however blissful, faded in time. When the meditation ended, suffering remained. He realized these methods were temporary shelters, not permanent liberation. Still restless, he turned to asceticism, the path of extreme renunciation. Along with 5 companions, he practiced austerities so severe they nearly destroyed his body. He ate only a few grains of rice each day. His skin clung to his bones. His veins stood out like ropes beneath his flesh. His eyes sank deep into their sockets. He held his breath until his body convulsed, stood motionless under the burning sun, and exposed himself to freezing nights without shelter. His determination was relentless. If liberation could be found through denial, he would find it. Yet, as the years passed, his strength waned. At last, near death, he collapsed by a riverbank, unable to rise. In that moment of weakness, he realized a crucial truth. Starving himself, punishing his body, had not freed him from suffering. It had only created new chains. He remembered his life as a prince, surrounded by luxury, and saw that indulgence had also failed to bring peace. 2 extremes, luxury and deprivation, had both led to emptiness. As he lay by the river, he understood what he would later call the middle way. True liberation is not found in extremes, but in balance, in walking a path between self-indulgence and self-mortification. At that riverbank, a young village woman named Sujata approached. She offered him a bowl of sweet milk rice, believing him to be a forest spirit. Siddhartha accepted, his hands trembling as he drank. Nourishment returned to his body, but more importantly, clarity returned to his mind. His 5 ascetic companions, shocked by what they saw as betrayal, abandoned him. But Siddhartha knew he had found a new direction. To walk the middle way required courage, not to cling to either indulgence or denial. It was a radical insight, one that set him apart from every path he had tried before. This stage of Siddhartha's journey resonates deeply with us today. Many of us oscillate between extremes. We chase pleasure, more money, more possessions, more recognition, believing satisfaction lies just ahead. When that fails, some swing to the opposite side, embracing burnout, self-punishment, or rigid control, thinking discipline alone will save us. Neither extreme brings lasting peace. Siddhartha's realization that balance is the key speaks across millennia. The middle way remains a guiding principle not only for spiritual practice but for daily living in our fast-paced world. As Siddhartha regained his strength, he resolved to continue his quest alone. He walked to a place called Bodh Gaya, where a great fig tree spread its branches like sheltering arms. There he sat determined. He vowed not to rise until he had found the truth. The years of wandering, the nights of austerity, the long search through philosophies and practices, all had prepared him for this moment. The renunciation had led him here to the threshold of awakening. The journey of renunciation is not only Siddhartha's story, it is also ours in quieter ways. Each of us at some point realizes that the life we are living does not answer the deepest questions of our hearts. We may not leave palaces at midnight, but we feel the pull to leave behind illusions, illusions of permanence, illusions of control, illusions of fulfillment through endless consumption. For some, renunciation may mean walking away from toxic careers or relationships. For others, it may mean renouncing inner patterns of greed, anger, or denial. What matters is not the form but the courage to step into the unknown in search of what is real. The great renunciation reminds us that freedom often requires loss. To gain truth, Siddhartha surrendered comfort. To gain wisdom, he surrendered certainty. To gain peace, he surrendered security. His story asks us, what are we willing to release in order to live fully? What illusions hold us captive and what truths wait beyond the walls we have built? In the silence of the forest, the prince who had once been shielded from every discomfort became the seeker who embraced discomfort as his teacher. His journey through teachers, austerities, and extremes forged a strength not of the body but of the spirit. And though his path was lonely, his determination was unshakable. He had renounced not only his kingdom but his illusions. He had given up not only his wealth but the idea that happiness could be found outside the heart. Now, on the eve of his enlightenment, he was ready to face the deepest questions of existence with nothing left to lose. The renunciation was not the end of his journey but the beginning of its most crucial chapter. It transformed Siddhartha from a man bound by the expectations of his family and culture into a seeker willing to challenge every assumption. It revealed that liberation is not a gift handed down by privilege, nor a prize earned by punishment, but a discovery waiting in the balance between extremes. It prepared him for the night under the Bodhi tree when he would confront not only the illusions of the world but the illusions within his own mind. And it prepared the world, though it did not yet know it, for the birth of the Buddha. The riverbank where Siddhartha accepted Sujata's simple bowl of milk, rice became a turning point not only in his journey but in the history of spiritual thought. That single act of nourishment was more than food for his body. It was food for his insight. After years of punishing himself with starvation and relentless austerities, he recognized a truth so subtle yet so profound that it shifted the axis of his quest. Extremes, whether of indulgence or denial, only deepen suffering. Balance is the path that frees. This insight would later be called the middle way. The middle way was not a compromise between pleasure and pain, but a revelation that liberation is not found in extremes at all. Pleasure traps the mind in attachment. Pain traps the mind in obsession. Both keep the seeker bound to self. To walk the middle way meant stepping off the swinging pendulum of indulgence and denial, and standing instead in stillness rooted in clarity. For Siddhartha, this realization was like the first rays of dawn after a long night. It gave direction, purpose, and hope, where before there had only been exhaustion. Yet realizing the path and walking it are not the same. His 5 companions, ascetics who had practiced beside him, saw his acceptance of nourishment as weakness. To them, the middle way was betrayal, proof he lacked the will to conquer desire. They abandoned him, leaving him utterly alone. Siddhartha felt the sting of their judgment but did not turn back. Their rejection confirmed the depth of his insight. Liberation could not be found in the approval of others, nor in clinging to their beliefs. It must be discovered in the quiet depths of his own experience. With renewed strength, he journeyed toward a quiet grove near a village called Bodh Gaya. There, beside a great fig tree whose branches spread wide and serene, he chose his seat. The earth was cool, the roots strong, and the shade wide enough to embrace him like a sheltering mother. He folded his legs, straightened his back, and set his mind in unwavering resolve. This is where he would remain, he told himself, until he discovered the truth. Whether it took days or years, whether his body endured or perished, he would not rise until he had pierced the heart of suffering. As night fell, the air grew still. The sounds of the forest rose, the call of birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of animals, but Siddhartha remained unmoved. His mind turned inward, searching not for escape but for understanding. Hours passed, darkness thickened, and with the deepening night came the greatest challenge of his life. In the stillness of meditation, he confronted not only the truths of existence but the inner forces that bind all beings: desire, fear, doubt, pride. These forces took form in his mind as Mara, the lord of illusion. Mara's army rose first as temptation. Beautiful figures appeared before Siddhartha, offering pleasures of the senses. Palaces of delight, foods rich with flavor, embraces of desire, all danced before his vision. Yet he did not move. He saw them for what they were, projections of craving, fragile as smoke. The images dissolved. Next, Mara sent fear. Armies of demons rushed toward him with weapons, raised their roars, shaking the air. Yet Siddhartha's mind remained still. The weapons turned to blossoms before reaching him, falling harmlessly at his feet. Mara then whispered doubt. Who are you to seek truth? Who are you to challenge the cycle of suffering? You are a man no more. You will fail as others have failed. Siddhartha touched the earth with his hand, calling it as witness. The ground itself seemed to tremble in response, affirming his right to seek liberation. Mara's voice fell silent. Through the long night, Siddhartha entered deeper states of meditation. He recalled countless past lives, seeing the endless cycle of birth and death repeating across ages. He saw beings rising and falling according to their actions, bound to suffering by ignorance and craving. He saw the laws of karma unfolding like patterns written in light. And then, as dawn approached, his insight deepened into the heart of truth. He saw that suffering is woven into existence itself, that craving and attachment give rise to suffering, that the end of craving brings the end of suffering, and that there is a path leading to that end. In this moment, he discovered the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The middle way had revealed its map. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Siddhartha's mind broke free of every chain. The illusions of self dissolved. Fear, desire, and ignorance melted away like dew before the morning sunday. In their place arose clarity, peace, and boundless compassion. The prince who had renounced everything became the awakened one, the Buddha. Beneath the Bodhi tree, he discovered not just a teaching but a new way of seeing reality. He saw that all beings carry the seeds of awakening within. That liberation is not reserved for a chosen few, but open to all who walk the path. The moment of enlightenment is often told as legend, but its power lies not in myth but in meaning. What Siddhartha realized is as relevant today as it was 25 centuries ago. In the modern world, we too chase extremes. Some drown in indulgence, seeking happiness in wealth consumption and constant stimulation. Others turn to self-denial, driving themselves into burnout, rigid discipline, or emotional numbness. Neither extreme heals the heart. The middle way reminds us that balance between work and rest, between discipline and compassion, between ambition and acceptance, is where true peace grows. Consider the rhythms of our own lives. We push ourselves to achieve, believing more success will bring contentment. When exhaustion sets in, we swing to the other side, seeking escape in distractions, substances, or avoidance. The cycle repeats. What if instead we paused, breathed, and chose balance? What if nourishment was not betrayal but wisdom? What if self-compassion was not weakness but strength? Siddhartha's acceptance of Sujata's gift shows us that liberation begins not with extremes but with a willingness to care for the body and mind as sacred vessels on the path. The symbolism of the Bodhi tree also carries timeless resonance. It was not in a palace or a temple that awakening occurred, but beneath a simple tree in the heart of nature. The Buddha's enlightenment reminds us that truth is not found in constructed illusions, but in the living reality of the present moment. Just as he sat firmly rooted to the earth, we too can ground ourselves in the simple here and now where clarity waits beneath the noise of craving and fear. The discovery of the middle way marked a revolution in spiritual practice. Until then, seekers believed liberation came only through extremes of ritual austerity or indulgence. Siddhartha's insight showed a different way, a path of mindfulness, compassion, and balance accessible to anyone. It did not require royal birth, wealth, or superhuman suffering. It required honesty, courage, and perseverance. That message spread across India and eventually across the world, touching lives in cultures far removed from its origin, yet resonating because the human condition is universal. What makes this chapter of Siddhartha's story so powerful is its invitation. It does not demand we starve ourselves or abandon our families. It does not command blind faith or rigid obedience. It simply asks us to notice the extremes in our lives and to consider another way. To see that clinging to pleasure brings pain, and clinging to pain brings despair. To see that balance, awareness, and kindness can transform even the most ordinary moments into steps on the path to freedom. The night beneath the Bodhi tree was not only the triumph of one man, it was the birth of a teaching that continues to guide seekers across centuries and continents. When we face our own temptations, fears, and doubts, we too sit beneath our own Bodhi trees. When we choose balance over extremes, compassion over judgment, clarity over illusion, we honor that night of awakening. The middle way is not an ancient relic. It is a living path waiting for us in every choice we make. When dawn broke on the morning after his long night of meditation, Siddhartha was no longer the searching prince nor the starving ascetic. He was the Buddha, the awakened one. His face reflected not triumph but peace, not conquest but compassion. He had not defeated the world but understood it. He had not escaped suffering but seen through its roots. And in the clarity of his awakening, he formulated a vision so simple, so practical, yet so profound that it would endure across millennia. That vision is known as the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha's first insight was not hidden in mystery. It began with honesty. Life, he realized, is marked by suffering. Not suffering in the dramatic sense alone, but in the quiet dissatisfaction that pervades even moments of joy. The ache of loss, the unease of change, the hunger for more, the inevitability of decline, these are woven into the fabric of existence. To name this was not to despair but to tell the truth. The first noble truth, life, involves suffering or dukkha. In that word lies the recognition that human experience, however sweet, is tinged with restlessness, impermanence, and incompleteness. The second noble truth pointed to the cause. Suffering does not arise from fate or punishment. It arises from craving and attachment. Our endless reaching for pleasure, for permanence, for identity creates the very pain we try to escape. We cling to youth though it must fade. We cling to health though the body changes. We cling to loved ones though death comes for all. And in clinging, we bind ourselves to sorrow. To see craving clearly is to understand the source of suffering. The third noble truth offered hope. If suffering arises from craving, then the end of craving is the end of suffering. To release the grasp, to loosen the fist that clings to what cannot last, is to discover freedom. This was not a promise of some distant paradise, but a possibility in this very life. Liberation is not found in denying suffering, but in transforming our relationship to it. Peace is possible. The fourth noble truth revealed the path. The Noble Eightfold Path is not a command, but a guide, a practical map for living with wisdom, compassion, and clarity. It is called noble not because it is reserved for the elite, but because it ennobles those who walk it. It is not a ladder to climb, but a circle of practices that nourish each other. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Together they form a way of living that frees the heart from the cycle of craving and suffering. Each element of the path speaks across time. Right view begins with seeing reality as it is not as we wish it to be. To see impermanence, to acknowledge change, to accept that joy and sorrow weave together. This is the foundation of wisdom. In modern life, right view asks us to look honestly at the illusions we build. The curated images on social media, the stories of endless growth in our economies, the belief that more always equals better, To see through illusion is the beginning of freedom. Right intention follows naturally. When we understand that craving causes suffering, our intention shifts from self-centered pursuit to compassion and kindness. We no longer act out of greed or hatred, but from the wish to alleviate suffering for ourselves and others. Imagine what our workplaces, our families, our nations would look like if right intention guided every choice. It does not require sainthood but sincerity, the willingness to orient life toward care rather than conquest. Right speech reminds us that words shape reality. To speak truthfully, gently, and with purpose is not a restriction but a liberation. In an age of constant communication where voices echo across digital platforms, speech has become more powerful than ever. Words can heal or harm, unite or divide. Practicing right speech means choosing language that nurtures rather than wounds. It means pausing before speaking, asking if our words are true, helpful, and kind. Right action extends this care into our deeds. It is the choice to act in ways that respect life, honesty, and integrity, to refrain from harm, to honor trust, to live ethically. In today's world, right action can mean everything from how we treat co-workers to how we consume products, from the fairness of our business practices to the compassion we show in daily interactions. It is not an abstract code, but a practical ethic for everyday living. Right livelihood deepens this reflection. The Buddha taught that the way we earn our living should not cause harm to others. This principle challenges us even now. Do our jobs contribute to well-being or to exploitation? Do they align with our values or force us to compromise them? In an interconnected global economy, right livelihood invites us to consider the wider impact of our choices, not only on profit but on people, animals, and the planet. Right effort speaks to the energy we bring to life. It is not the frantic pushing of ambition nor the sloth of avoidance, but the steady cultivation of what is wholesome. To nurture compassion rather than resentment, mindfulness rather than distraction, clarity rather than confusion. Right effort is about where we place our mental and emotional energy. It is about learning that what we water grows and choosing carefully which seeds we cultivate. Right mindfulness is the heart of the practice. To be present, fully alive to each moment without judgment or clinging. Mindfulness transforms ordinary experiences into opportunities for freedom. Washing dishes, walking in the park, listening to a friend, each becomes a chance to be awake rather than lost in thought. In our modern age of distraction, mindfulness is both radical and necessary. It invites us to return to the present where life truly happens. Right concentration completes the path. It is the deep focus of meditation, the cultivation of a mind that is steady, clear, and undisturbed. Concentration is not escape but clarity. It allows us to see the nature of our minds and to release the patterns that bind us. In a world of constant noise, the discipline of concentration is a gift, a refuge that grounds us in the depth of awareness. Together, the Eightfold Path is not a set of rules but a way of life. It is a medicine for the restless heart, a framework that integrates wisdom, ethics, and practice. It does not promise an easy road but offers a reliable compass. And it is not meant for monks alone but for anyone who seeks peace in the midst of daily life. When the Buddha first shared these truths in the deer park of Sarnath, his former companions listened with skepticism. They had abandoned him, believing his acceptance of food was weakness. Yet as he spoke of suffering, its cause, its end, and the path, their hearts stirred. They recognized the clarity of his insight, and one by one they became his first disciples. The wheel of Dharma had begun to turn, setting in motion a teaching that would spread far beyond the forests of India, across continents and centuries. For us today, the Four Noble Truths remain as relevant as ever. The first truth asks us to acknowledge the dissatisfaction that shadows even our successes. The second truth invites us to look at our cravings, the endless reaching that drives modern consumer culture. The third truth offers hope, reminding us that peace is possible not through more possessions but through letting go. The fourth truth gives us a path, practical and grounded, to walk each day. These truths are not abstract philosophy but living guidance. Imagine applying them in daily life. You face stress at work, deadlines piling up. The first truth: yes, this is suffering. The second truth: the craving for perfection. The attachment to success fuels the stress. The third truth: release the clinging, breathe, remember your worth is not tied to achievement. The fourth truth: practice right effort, right mindfulness, right speech. Respond with clarity rather than panic. In this way, ancient wisdom becomes living practice. The Eightfold Path also speaks to our collective challenges. As societies, we struggle with inequality, division, and environmental crisis. Right livelihood challenges us to consider industries that exploit people or harm the earth. Right speech invites us to transform toxic discourse into dialogue. Right view asks us to see interconnectedness rather than isolation. These are not just personal practices but communal medicine. The Buddha's vision, though born in a distant time, addresses the wounds of our modern world. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path do not demand belief. They invite testing. The Buddha called his teaching ehipassiko, come and see. He did not ask for blind faith but for personal experience. Try mindfulness, he said. Notice how it changes your mind. Try compassion. See how it changes your relationships. The path is not about dogma but discovery. Each step is a practice, each practice a seed, each seed capable of growing into freedom. This is why the teaching endures. It is not bound to culture or language, to east or west. It speaks to the universal human condition. We all know suffering. We all crave and cling. We all long for peace. The Four Noble Truths give us a way to understand, and the Eightfold Path gives us a way to walk. Together, they form the heart of a wisdom tradition that continues to resonate, not because it demands obedience, but because it offers liberation. As the Buddha rose from his seat under the Bodhi tree, his face calm and radiant, he did not hold secret doctrines. He held a simple vision: acknowledge suffering, understand its cause, see its end, and walk the path. That simplicity is its power. For 2.5 millennia, people across continents have tested these truths and found them reliable. They are not distant philosophy, but a mirror held to our lives. In that mirror, we see not despair, but possibility, not resignation, but freedom. And so the teaching spread not by conquest or wealth, but by the quiet transformation of hearts. The Buddha offered not salvation from outside, but awakening from within. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path remain his gift, a lamp passed hand to hand across generations. For those willing to pause, reflect, and practice, the path still shines. It begins where we are, in the middle of our busy lives, and leads us toward the same freedom the Buddha discovered beneath the Bodhi tree. The Buddha's first disciples listened to his words in the quiet of the deer park at Sarnath, and something remarkable happened. As he spoke of suffering, its cause, its end, and the path, their minds grew still, their hearts opened, and a new way of seeing unfolded within them. These men who had once doubted him now felt the clarity of truth ringing like a bell. What began with a single awakening beneath a fig tree began to ripple outward, touching one heart, then another, then countless more. And from that moment forward, the wheel of Dharma, the wheel of truth, has never stopped turning. But what does this mean for us thousands of years later, living in a world far removed from the dusty roads of ancient India? What do the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path mean to someone lying awake in a city apartment, someone rushing to catch a train, someone raising children while balancing the weight of bills and deadlines? The answer is simple yet profound. The teaching is not about escaping life. It is about transforming the way we live it. The Buddha did not point to a paradise elsewhere. He pointed to the present moment, reminding us that peace is not hidden in distant places, but waiting here and now if we have the eyes to see. Think about the phrase, the true home. We often believe home is a place, four walls, a roof, an address. We spend our lives building, decorating, upgrading, moving as though the perfect home will finally bring peace. Yet no matter how beautiful the house, storms come, possessions break, people change, and the sense of safety can vanish. The Buddha suggested that our truest home is not outside us but within. It is the state of a mind at ease, a heart that rests in awareness rather than craving. This inner home cannot be stolen, cannot be destroyed, and does not depend on circumstances. It is carried with us wherever we go. How do we find this true home? The Four Noble Truths give us the blueprint, and the Eightfold Path gives us the tools. Right view opens our eyes to impermanence, showing us that change is not our enemy but our reality. Right intention invites us to orient our lives toward compassion and kindness. Right speech reminds us that the words we choose can create either harmony or division. Right action calls us to integrity in every deed. Right livelihood challenges us to align our work with our values. Right effort teaches us to cultivate the seeds of goodness rather than resentment. Right mindfulness anchors us in the present, and right concentration steadies our minds so that clarity can shine. Each step is a brick laid in the foundation of the true home. Yet walking the path is not about perfection. Even the Buddha did not promise a life free of difficulty. He promised a new relationship with difficulty. When storms come, the true home provides shelter. When losses arrive, the true home offers resilience. When joy blooms, the true home allows us to savor it without clinging. This is not the fragile piece of denial, but the strong piece of understanding. To live in the true home is to recognize that we cannot control life's changes, but we can choose how we meet them. Imagine for a moment a parent overwhelmed by the noise of children, the weight of responsibility, the fatigue of endless tasks. In frustration, they might think peace is impossible until the house is quiet, until the children are grown, until the schedule clears. But what if peace could be found in the midst of the noise itself? What if patience with a crying child was itself a spiritual practice? What if washing dishes was a meditation? What if the chaos of daily life was the very field in which compassion could grow? The Buddha's message was radical because it suggested that we do not have to wait for ideal conditions. The true home is built in the very heart of the life we already live. This vision is especially powerful in modern societies where we are taught to chase more, to seek happiness just beyond the next purchase, the next achievement, the next milestone. We exhaust ourselves running after illusions, believing peace will arrive when we finally get there. But like Siddhartha in his palace, we discover that no amount of perfection outside can quiet the longing inside. The teaching of the true home cuts through this endless chase. It tells us stop running, sit where you are, look deeply. The peace you seek is already within you, waiting for your attention. For many in the West, the word renunciation may feel foreign or even threatening. We imagine monks leaving families, people giving up possessions, lives of austerity. But renunciation in the Buddha's sense is not about rejecting life. It is about releasing illusions. To renounce clinging is to open our hands and discover that freedom does not come from holding tightly, but from letting go. Each of us has illusions. We can release the illusion that success will guarantee happiness, the illusion that youth will last forever, the illusion that we are separate from one another. Each release brings us closer to our true home. There is also a collective dimension to this teaching. In a world facing division, inequality, and ecological crisis, the middle way offers not only personal peace, but communal healing. Right livelihood asks us to consider the impact of our industries on people and the planet. Right speech urges us to move beyond toxic discourse and into dialogue. Right view asks us to see that our lives are interconnected, that no one can thrive while others suffer. The true home is not just an individual refuge, but a vision of a society rooted in compassion and balance. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of the Buddha's teaching is its invitation. It does not demand blind faith. It does not require anyone to accept it without testing. The Buddha always said, "Come and see. Try it. Practice mindfulness for a day and notice how it changes your experience. Speak with kindness rather than anger and see what happens to your relationships. Choose balance instead of extremes and watch how your stress eases." The path is not theory, but experiment. The true home is not given to us, but built step by step in our daily lives. Think of your own life for a moment. Where do you seek peace? Is it in the next achievement, the next purchase, the next vacation? How long does that peace last? And what would it mean to discover a peace that does not fade when circumstances change? That is the gift of the true home. It is not fragile because it does not depend on conditions. It is steady because it arises from understanding. When we see clearly, we no longer fight reality. We live within it gracefully. As the Buddha walked from village to village after his enlightenment, people asked him what he had gained. His reply was simple: "I am awake." To awaken is to see life as it is, and still rest in compassion. It is to discover the home within, the place where the restless mind grows still. We may not all become Buddhas, but each of us can taste this awakening in moments of presence. Sitting quietly with a cup of tea, listening deeply to a friend, watching the sky change at dusk, each can be a doorway to the true home if we allow it. And so the story comes full circle. The prince who once lived in a palace of illusion discovered a home beyond palaces, a home not built of stone or guarded by walls, but carried in the heart. His journey reminds us that we too can step beyond illusion, beyond craving, beyond fear. We too can walk the middle way, practice the path, and discover peace in the life we already have. The invitation is timeless and universal. Wherever we are, whoever we are, the true home is waiting. The question that remains is not whether peace is possible. The question is whether we are willing to pause long enough to notice it. The world urges us to run faster, to consume more, to fear missing out. The Buddha's voice urges us to stop, to breathe, to see. When we do, the true home reveals itself not as a distant goal, but as the ground beneath our feet. It is here, in this breath, in this moment, in the life we are living now. The story of Siddhartha Gautama is not just a tale of a prince turned wanderer. It is a mirror. When we hear of his sheltered youth inside the palace walls, we see our own attempts to construct palaces of comfort, our digital fortresses, our endless distractions meant to protect us from the realities of aging, sickness, and death. When we follow him beyond the gates and watch his shock at encountering those realities for the first time, we feel our own unease when life confronts us with the fragility we try so hard to deny. When he leaves his family in the quiet of the night, we recognize the courage required to renounce illusions and step into the unknown. And when he sits beneath the Bodhi tree and awakens to the truth of the middle way, we are invited to awaken with him. What does it mean to awaken in our time? For most of us, it does not mean leaving families or abandoning careers. It does not mean starving ourselves in forests or sitting for weeks under ancient trees. Awakening in the 21st century may be far simpler, yet just as profound. It means pausing amid the rush of daily life to notice the breath. It means questioning the stories society tells us about success and happiness. It means turning towards suffering instead of away from it, and learning to respond with compassion rather than fear. Awakening is not about escaping reality, but about seeing it clearly and choosing to live differently. The Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path are not ancient artifacts. They are living practices. The first noble truth reminds us that dissatisfaction runs through modern life as surely as it did through the lives of people 25 centuries ago. We feel it when we scroll endlessly through glowing screens, comparing our ordinary days to the highlight reels of others. We feel it when achievement leaves us hollow, when possessions lose their shine, when even love carries the ache of impermanence. The second noble truth asks us to see that this dissatisfaction is fueled not by the world itself, but by our craving for it to be different. We long for permanence, where there is only change, for control, where there is only uncertainty. The third noble truth offers hope, telling us that letting go of craving is possible, and with it comes peace. And the fourth noble truth gives us a path of balance, integrity, and mindfulness to walk each day. The path is not a ladder to climb once and be done. It is a circle, a rhythm, a practice. Right view calls us to see reality without distortion. Right intention guides our choices with kindness. Right speech reminds us to use words as instruments of healing. Right action shapes our deeds with integrity. Right livelihood challenges us to work in ways that honor life. Right effort encourages us to cultivate seeds of compassion. Right mindfulness grounds us in the present. Right concentration steadies the mind so that clarity can emerge. Together, these 8 practices form the architecture of the true home the Buddha described. They are not abstract. They are as practical as choosing how to speak in an argument, how to respond to disappointment, how to treat the person in front of us at this very moment. The image of the middle way is especially vital today. We live in cultures that glorify extremes. We are urged to chase more, to push harder, to never rest. Or when exhaustion overwhelms us, we are tempted to collapse into avoidance, retreating into distraction, substances, or numbness. Neither extreme brings peace. The middle way calls us back to balance. It tells us that nourishment is not weakness, that discipline without compassion is empty, that joy without awareness is fleeting. To walk the middle way in our time may mean balancing ambition with rest, technology, with silence, achievement with gratitude, discipline with kindness. It is not glamorous, but it is liberating. What does it mean to build the true home here and now? It means realizing that peace is not waiting at the end of a promotion, a purchase, or a vacation. Peace is available in this breath, in this conversation, in this small act of kindness. The true home is not a place, but a state of being. It is the awareness that wherever we are, whatever we face, we can meet it with presence. The storm may rage outside, but inside the home of mindfulness there is calm. Loss may come, but inside the home of compassion there is resilience. Joy may arise, but inside the home of wisdom there is freedom from clinging. The true home cannot be shaken, because it is not built of wood or stone, but of understanding. The Buddha's life also reminds us that the path of awakening is not selfish. His enlightenment did not lead him to retreat into solitude forever. It led him back to people, back to teaching, back to guiding others. Compassion is the natural fruit of awakening. When we see that all beings suffer from the same illusions, our hearts open. We realize that anger, greed, and fear are not enemies to hate, but wounds to heal. In this light, every person we meet becomes part of the practice. Every conversation is an opportunity to embody the path. Every conflict is a chance to practice compassion. The true home is not only within us, but also between us, built in our relationships and communities. The story of the Buddha has been told for centuries, but it is more than a story. It is an invitation. It invites us to look at our own lives and ask, where am I clinging? What illusions keep me trapped? What would it mean to let go? It invites us to test the path for ourselves. Try mindfulness for a day. Try compassion for a week. Try speaking truthfully and gently, even in disagreement. Try seeing impermanence not as an enemy, but as a teacher. The invitation is not to believe, but to experience. The path does not demand perfection. It asks only sincerity and willingness. Perhaps the most powerful lesson is that awakening is not reserved for the extraordinary. The Buddha was not a god. He was a human being who looked deeply into life and refused to turn away. His enlightenment reveals the potential that lives in every human heart. Each of us carries the capacity to awaken, to live with clarity, to discover peace that does not depend on circumstances. The Bodhi tree may stand in India, but the ground beneath our own feet is just as sacred. Every moment offers the chance to sit, to breathe, to see. And so we return to the image of home. The palaces of illusion that once surrounded Siddhartha were built of wealth, privilege, and denial. Our palaces may be built of screens, schedules, and ambitions, but like him, we can step beyond the gates. We can look honestly at aging, sickness, and death, not to despair, but to live more fully. We can renounce not our families, but our illusions. We can walk not to forests, but to the present moment. And in doing so, we can find the true home that cannot be lost. The journey of the Buddha is the journey of humanity. It begins with ignorance, passes through suffering, awakens to truth, and discovers compassion. It is not a distant legend, but a map. The question is whether we are willing to follow it, not in dramatic gestures, but in daily choices. Will we pause amid busyness to breathe? Will we speak words that heal rather than harm? Will we choose balance over extremes, kindness over cruelty, presence over distraction? These are the steps of the path. Each one builds the true home. Each one brings awakening closer. The echo of that night beneath the Bodhi tree still resounds. It calls across centuries, across cultures, across languages. It calls to each of us here and now. You too can awaken. You too can build the true home. You too can live free from the endless cycle of craving and fear. The invitation is open. The path is before you. The only step that matters is the one you take today. The story of Siddhartha Gautama is more than history. It is a journey that mirrors our own. From the comfort of the palace to the shock of confronting aging, sickness and death, from the courage of renunciation to the discovery of the middle way, from enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree to the teaching of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, his life offers us a map. It does not belong only to monks in robes or seekers in distant temples. It belongs to anyone who has felt the weight of suffering, the hunger for meaning, and the longing for peace. In other words, it belongs to all of us. What Siddhartha discovered was not a distant paradise, but the reality of the present moment. He saw that life contains suffering, that craving fuels it, that peace comes from letting go, and that a practical path exists to guide us step by step. These truths are as relevant today as they were in ancient India. We too live in palaces of illusion, digital palaces filled with images of perfection, cultural palaces built on the promise that more will make us happy. But like the young prince, we eventually discover that no amount of comfort or distraction can silence the deeper questions of the heart. The middle way calls us to balance. In a world of extremes where ambition burns us out and distraction numbs us, balance is revolutionary. To choose moderation over excess, compassion over competition, mindfulness over distraction, is to walk a path that leads not to emptiness but to freedom. The Eightfold Path is not abstract philosophy. It is as practical as speaking kindly when we are tempted to lash out, as real as choosing work that nourishes rather than harms, as immediate as pausing to breathe before reacting. Each small act is a step toward awakening. The true home that the Buddha spoke of is not a place we must find on a map. It is not hidden in a distant monastery or waiting in some perfect future. It is already here within us, waiting to be uncovered. It is the peace of a mind that no longer clings, the resilience of a heart that no longer fears change, the clarity of a life lived in awareness. This home is available to anyone, no matter where they live or what burdens they carry. It is built moment by moment, choice by choice, practice by practice. The invitation is simple. Pause. Look deeply at your own life. Notice the ways you cling, the illusions you protect, the suffering that arises. Then take a step, however small, on the path of balance, mindfulness, and compassion. Try it for a day. Try it for a week. See for yourself how the practice transforms not only your mind but also your relationships and your world. The Buddha did not ask for blind belief. He asked only that we see clearly and walk sincerely. The story that began with a prince in a palace ends with a universal call. You too can awaken. You too can build the true home. The path is open, and it begins exactly where you stand.